Bennett knelt beside the piece of matting, studying it more carefully in the light of his phone's flashlight. Up close, the stain was clearly blood, though it had long since dried to a rust-brown color that had merged with the natural fibers. The edges where it had been cut were precise, surgical. Harold had removed this section with care, preserving it like a specimen or a memento. As Bennett stared at the matting, something strange happened. The silence that had been his constant companion for 29 years seemed to shift, to develop texture and weight. It was still silence. He could hear nothing, but it felt full, pregnant with possibility. He reached out and touched the stained fibers. The world exploded into sensation. Not sound exactly, but something like sound. Vibrations that seemed to bypass his damaged ears entirely and resonate directly in his bones. He could feel voices, urgent and afraid, coming from the matting beneath his fingers. A woman's voice pleading. A man's voice, slurred with alcohol and rage. Another man's voice, younger, desperate. Please, Cliff. Just let us go. The boy doesn't need to see this. See what? See his whore mother running away with my brother? She's not running away with me. She's leaving you because you hurt her. Because you scare her. I scare her. I scare her. And then sounds that weren't voices. The crash of furniture being overturned. The sharp crack of something hitting something else. A woman's scream cut short. The wet sound of impact. The sound of struggle. Of men fighting with the desperation that comes from knowing that only one will walk away. Bennett jerked his hand back from the matting, gasping. The strange not sound faded, leaving him alone with his familiar silence. But the experience had been so vivid, so real, that he could still feel the vibrations in his fingertips. Harold hadn't been imagining things. Something of that night had indeed been trapped in the fibers, preserved like an audio recording that could only be played under specific circumstances. Bennett had touched it, and somehow accessed the final moments of his mother's life. The last words spoken in this house before violence changed everything. He understood now why Harold had kept this piece hidden for so many years. It was evidence, but it was also a form of torture. A permanent record of the worst night of Harold's life. The night he'd killed his own brother to save a woman and child he loved. Bennett sat back on his heels, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. If trauma could somehow be embedded in physical objects, if the emotional weight of violence could be preserved in the very materials that witnessed it, then his work investigating crime scenes had only scratched the surface of what was possible. He thought of the Henley house, of the displaced mat in the study that had drawn his attention so powerfully. Had that mat witnessed something similar? Was there a reason he'd been drawn to that particular case, that specific piece of evidence? The pattern was too clear to ignore. 2 houses, 2 families destroyed by violence, 2 pieces of flooring that seemed to hold more than they should. Bennett had spent his career writing about crime, but perhaps crime had been writing about him as well, drawing him back to scenes that echoed his own origins. He carefully gathered the matting and the photographs, wrapping them back in the old sheet Harold had used. Whatever power this piece of floor held, whatever memories it preserved, they were his responsibility now. Harold had carried the burden for 32 years. Now it was Bennett's turn. As he made his way back downstairs, Bennett found Catherine in the living room, sitting in Harold's favorite chair with a cup of tea grown cold in her hands. She looked up as he entered, her eyes questioning. "I'm going back to California," Bennett told her. "There's a case I need to finish. But first, I want you to help me understand something." Catherine nodded. "What do you need to know?" "The night it happened, you said I was hiding upstairs, that I saw everything. Do you know exactly where I was hiding? Catherine's face grew pale. Harold said he found you in the study closet. You'd wedged yourself behind some boxes, and you wouldn't come out for hours. When he finally coaxed you out, you couldn't speak. Wouldn't speak. It was like the words had been stolen from you, along with the sounds. Bennett nodded, the pieces continuing to fall into place. And the mats. Do you remember anything specific about them? They were beautiful, Catherine said slowly. Your mother had ordered them special from some place in Los Angeles. Real grass weaving, not the synthetic stuff. She said they reminded her of a meditation room she'd seen in a magazine. She was so proud of how they looked in that room. But after that night, Harold tore them all up. He said he couldn't stand to look at them, that they reminded him too much of what had happened. He replaced them with hardwood to match the rest of the house. But he kept one piece, like I said. I never understood why. Bennett understood why. Harold had kept that piece because it was evidence of the truth, proof of the story he could never tell. But more than that, it was a connection to the people who had died that night. Not just Cliff and Donna, but the child Bennett had been. The hearing child who had witnessed something so terrible that it had literally struck him deaf. Catherine, Bennett said carefully, I need you to promise me something. What? If anything happens to me, if I don't come back from this case I'm working on, I need you to destroy that piece of matting. Burn it, bury it, whatever you have to do. But don't let anyone else touch it. Catherine stared at him with growing alarm. Bennett, what are you talking about? What do you think is going to happen? I don't know, Bennett said honestly. But I think there are some patterns that repeat themselves, some stories that echo across time and space. I think what happened here 32 years ago might be connected to what I've been investigating in Bakersfield. And I think the only way to break the pattern is to see it through to the end. Catherine reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't go, she said. Whatever you think you need to prove, whatever you think you owe to the past, it's not worth risking your life over. Bennett squeezed her hand gently. I'm not risking my life, he said. I'm trying to save it. All these years I've been living someone else's story, carrying someone else's guilt. It's time I found out who I really am. He kissed Catherine's forehead and gathered his things. The drive back to Bakersfield would take 6 hours, but Bennett found himself oddly eager to make it. The Henley house was waiting for him, with its displaced mat and its irregular stains and its own burdened family secrets. As he loaded his car, Bennett caught his reflection in the rear window. He looked different somehow. Older, maybe, or simply more solid. For the first time in years, he felt as though he was moving towards something rather than away from it. The piece of blood-stained matting sat wrapped in the passenger seat beside him, a strange companion for the journey ahead. Bennett could feel its presence even without looking at it directly, the way you could feel someone watching you from across a room. The highway stretched ahead, empty and straight, leading him back toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. But want, Bennett had learned, was less important than need, and he needed to know how the story ended. Behind him, the house on Cedar Street grew smaller in the rearview mirror, carrying its secrets back into silence. But the silence itself was traveling with him now, transformed from empty absence into pregnant possibility. The drive back to Bakersfield passed in a strange fugue state. Bennett found himself hyper-aware of every sensation except sound. The vibration of the engine through the steering wheel, the play of late afternoon light across the dashboard, the weight of the wrapped matting pressing against the passenger seat like a sleeping animal. Twice he pulled over at rest stops, not because he needed fuel or food.